Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast with your hosts, Jason Milford and Brian Hernandez. Brian, how are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. We're recording on a Sunday night, which we generally don't do too often. So, as we were talking about before this, lighting is not as good today, but I'm very excited. Um, Playoffs has been pretty crazy so far, so a lot of fun. Jeff, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Can't complain with the series going on. Tied a piece. Been some interesting performances we've seen, so can't wait to unpack on them.
Yeah, for sure. And then when we have not this coming Thursday, but what the following Thursday is the NBA draft. So next week definitely is going to be our draft episode ish. So I'm very excited for that.
Perfect. I can't wait for that as well. But today, the topics are going to be obviously a recap of where we are at with the finals as it draws near its end. And also some of our top free agent predictions and where we think some guys will land. Um, and then we'll finish up with a weekly roundup. Brian, are you ready?
Yeah, man. Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So going into today, Sunday, not May, June the 12th, we are in we are locked up in a tie. I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. The series is tied at two apiece, where we've seen great performances from both sides. Notably, some guys that will be considered for that finals MVP if it goes one way or the other is Steph Curry and Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. But before we even go any further into this, I wanted to mention first is that I really think that there's a case where if the Celtics are able to actually pull this off and win this championship this year, that the guy that should win that MVP should be Jalen Brown,
Yep.
based off of the performances that he has been able to show in this playoffs. He's been shooting relatively efficiently throughout the series. He has around 23 points per game, grabbing 7 rebounds a game and 3 assists. Shooting not amazing, but it's pretty efficient. With around 45% from the field and 37% from three. He has truly left his mark on this series, and I think he's been in all of the games that mattered for the Celtics at this point. He has been the guy that led the engine rather than which many would think would be Jason Tatum. And it's not saying that Jason Tatum's not having a good series, but their numbers are relatively similar. And I'm liking what I see out of Jalen Brown in the series a lot more than what I'm seeing out of Jason Tatum. What do you think about that, Brian?
I am 100% on the same boat. I was literally going to say the same thing. If there's anyone on the Celtics side that should get that Finals MVP, barring any crazy performances from Jason Tatum in these next two games, it should be Jalen Brown. I mean, he's been probably their most consistent guy like this entire playoffs because we've talked about it a little bit last episode as well. Jalen Brown definitely blows up and has some amazing, not Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum has some amazing games and blows up, but then he has a couple stinkers in there and he's really, it's not super equal. It's not super consistent. You can't rely on it all the time. And this is where it kind of maybe goes back to our previous conversation of like, is Jason Tatum that all star or that superstar yet? If not, or these last couple performances definitely I think brought him down in that conversation. But Jalen Brown, man, he's been so consistent. He's been really nice. He's, I don't know, when I'm watching the games, like I feel like he's the best player on the Celtics side. Like, even though you know that Jason Tatum is that guy, he's just not showing up, and he's just not been good. And it's definitely surprising. Are you, I guess, more surprised about even in this last game that we had where Stephen Curry went off like crazy? It was still like a pretty close game for the most part. And the Celtics just, especially with Jason Tatum just not showing up. Are you surprised by that these games have just been that close though?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting when you like saying that he doesn't show up because
Yeah.
the thing is the points are still there, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
points, the effort, the stats that he's giving, like he was pretty close to a triple double in that last game,
Yeah.
but there's just something. It's the eye test. It's the
Yes.
when you're actually watching the game. If you're just gonna look at the stats, you're gonna think that he's having amazing games out there. But
Yeah.
there's just boneheaded mistakes that he's making. There's points where unforced errors are happening, or there's just like simply bunnies that typically go in for him that just don't seem to be going in the series. And obviously, we know that in Game 6 of last series in the Eastern Conference Finals, he did get injured, and you wonder how much that is hampering how he's playing right now.
Sure.
But at the same time, um, there's not enough for us to say, we're going to dismiss his play because of that, But there's been several moments that I've seen where it just seemed like it was a boneheaded decision. Like there was one pass he made where he was trying to pass it across court and Steph Curry just intercepted it, but like there was never a real pass in that situation where he would make a clean pass to his teammate. There's been moments where he's driving out the lane and he just simply loses the ball, and you're just like, these are the boneheaded like decisions that are going to decide a final, especially when you're playing a team such as the Warriors, where you have a guy like Stephen Curry that is just a juggernaut on offense. And if you give him enough chances, he will find a way to win this game. So it's just more and more you think about the inefficiencies that he has in his games are becoming more glaring as to why they're losing rather than how the ceiling of what his game could be or is not being magnified right now, which you would think it would be being in these stakes.
Yeah. Do you so you touched on, Stephen Curry, just his, game 4 performance, lights out, incredible. Are you surprised at all by how well Steph Curry's been in these playoffs, and especially like that game 4, and how he's carrying the Warriors right now?
Not really. I always and I said this. My biggest issue with the
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 Warriors.
choice
Oh,
of
sorry.
not the Warriors of the choice of selecting Marcus Smart
Oh,
as the defensive player of the game was more about like, yes, I understand how great defensively he is. I think he's getting credited more for being the anchor of their defense
yeah.
rather being an actual just being one man that could stop someone effectively, right? And the reason why I say that is because the Celtics primarily go through a switch off defense where just like a lot of teams have adopted this at this point, is where when a defender comes up to our offensive players coming up into a pick and roll, The defender, instead of going over the screen or going under the screen, they typically will switch the defender. And because of that, that would lead to being in a benefit for the Celtics most time because they have quite versatile defenders. And having a lineup bolstering guys that are all over 6'5", I believe.
Yeah.
All of them are all over 6'5", and then they're not all relatively slow or too big. And Patrick Williams, I mean Robert Williams
Robert.
being being the tallest, and I think he's 6'10". But that's where it's feeding into exactly what Steph Curry needs because Steph Curry, you can't play drop set coverage on Steph Curry. I've actually felt like the criticisms of some of the big men that are on the Celtics in this finals that you'll hear typically. Mark Jackson was big on this during this series is that the defender needs to come up more, and the issue is that Steph Curry is, as much as he is an amazing offensive player from beyond the 3-point line, he still has the speed to blow by these bigger guys, and some of these bigger guys just cannot deal with that. So a lot of it is, I think, that it's feeding into the type of defensive set that allows Steph Curry to be the player he is, rather than a lot of the situations where you'd see what other superstars that the Celtics have played in this playoffs. Because think about it, the switch, even if Marcus Smart is the defender he is, the switch that is typically going to come for them is a guy that's bigger and not as fast as Steph Curry, and Steph Curry could choose to pull up from 33 feet, right? And then you look back at the other superstars that they played, the primary defender that's on them is typically Jason Tatum. So that's a bigger, broader guy, and typically whoever is going to switch onto them at that point is a guy that's even bigger or broader. And those superstars are all of those sizes. Why I saw them have more issues, like a Kevin Durant or a Giannis, because they are playing with someone that is within their same like space and size, you know. And Giannis is not known, even though he is a fast guy, is not known as like a first step guy. You know, he doesn't have a sudden burst of speed compared to where Steph Curry could hurt you with a certain first step in that same sense. So I think it's just feeding right into what benefits him being the size he is, the defender that's on him, and how he can get away from it.
So is there, like, if you're running the Celtics right now, what would you do differently to try to stop the Warriors and Steph Curry specifically?
I think that it's time to officially switch off Marcus and put a bigger guy in a Tatum or a Jalen Brown on Steph Curry to beat him up a little bit more, because I think the times that we've seen Steph Curry not have the most efficient series is when a bigger defender is already on him that is not too big, but also big enough to kind of bully him a little bit, right? And what I would expect is never switch off. Never switch off when Steph Curry's there. I'm fighting over every screen. I'm fighting over under screens if I get the choice as well. If I can't go over it, because I think that constantly harassing him would be a lot easier for keeping him at bay than having that switch mentality be a big part of your defensive scheme. I feel like it honestly could change how the game is. And being that we already seen how Tatum, like I said, he still has a point production, but there's a lot of boneheaded decisions being made. I think I would switch Jason Tatum to honestly defend him and I would have Marcus Smart rather on Clay, or Jalen Brown on Clay, and then Jordan Poole. If you have a guy, Jordan Poole has had some moments, but like you have a guy like Jalen Brown on him, or a guy like Marcus Smart on him, being the primary defender for them, is still going to be as effective as if you had the other guys that were on him. So just think it's a you got to try to see how much you could keep him at bay because you're not going to stop him ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. I think that'd be pretty interesting to see. I think they need to do something different because what they've been doing so far, not working at all. Definitely needs to be at least have somebody else beat them because at least we haven't seen Clay be the same Clay that he's was in the past. Like you mentioned, Jordan Poole has his nights, not super consistent. Maybe try to have him beat you or just somebody else. Now that we've seen 4 games so far, series is tied up. Does your prediction change at all? Does where does your thought go on how long the series actually ends up being? Who wins?
I still got my prediction that the Warriors win in six. But I will say the biggest X factor in the series is on the Celtics. It's how does Al Horford play?
Yes.
And there's no answer for if Al Horford comes to play because granted, he's not going to garnish the same type of defensive priorities as the other guys on the team. So him being able to be viable when he's on the corner, to get those mid-range shots, to be able to get to the rim sometimes as well, or get an extra rebound when it's needed, is very important for this team, and them being able to um, compromise how the Warriors are going to want to defend them. And a lot of the times, like you saw, there was a point, I think it was game 2, where they went into a zone and they were pretty much daring the Celtics to shoot threes. And that's a moment where you need Al Horford to say, "Bet you want to dare
Yeah.
me to shoot a three? I'll shoot a three and I'll make it." You know, and you need that. Minor technical difficulty, but we're back. Um, yeah, so one of the things why I say he's a major X factor in the series, for the Celtics is because the Celtics do have stretch bigs, but the biggest issues with those other bigs, and specifically I'm talking about Dice, is that defensively he's just not that same type of player that Horford could be. And it's very important that if Horford is on, this team could win, and they could win the championship if he's on in these next potentially 3 games, to figure it out and help them win the championship. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I remember one of the last previous episodes we did. I was hyping up Horford like crazy, especially during the Miami series. I was like, man, Horford's the guy. He's killing it every night. This guy is unstoppable. Where did he like? He was kept on the bench for the OKC Thunder, and now he comes to the Celtics, and he's just fantastic. He's exactly what they needed, and then the man's been stinking it up. He's definitely been a huge miss for them so far. If he can come back and do well, ooh, man, the Celtics are scary. The Celtics are just scary in general. Like when things are going right, we saw it in what game 1 or 2, or I think it was game 1, of just
He
like,
won. Yeah.
yeah, when things are going right, that team's crazy. It's same thing on the other side too, especially the firepower of the Warriors. I want to ask your thoughts about Draymond. Draymond's definitely been getting a lot of flack online, especially for his antics of pulling down Jalen Brown's pants, trying to pull down his pants, and all this, the football tackles and all this other stuff. What do you think about what Draymond's is going through in these playoffs right now and what he's done?
Honestly, I don't think there's a real answer to it. Like to say like why he's playing the way he's playing right now. Um, I guess the best answer is to say that they're playing the best defensive team in the league. Would be the best way to put it. But
Yeah.
Draymond was never there to be the guy to put up points for you, right?
Yep.
He was there to be your facilitator. But a lot of the issues that I've been seeing in the series is that making un he's committing a lot of unforced errors where he's seeing himself becoming frustrated, and in turn on defense he's trying to overcompensate, and that's why we're seeing the plays where he's defending the way he's defending, or he's doing the things that he's doing. And I think it's largely because frustration, and it's also him trying to get under their skin as well too, so that they know so he could get them off of their
Yeah.
games, honestly. And granted, he got pretty close to doing that in game two. They did lose the game. The Celtics did lose the game, so he did in a way was successful. But I think the bigger issue that comes from this whole thing is Draymond the effectively not treating Draymond the same way as other individuals on the court is, in my eyes, an eyesore. Draymond has been, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, is since 2016 when, granted, even I would say I would not have suspended him at that time for the one game, or put him in a situation where he became suspended, because I think he met the limit of technical fouls you can
Yeah.
get in a series before you get a 1 game suspension. But I wouldn't put him in a situation, and that because of that situation where he's being ejected or he's now sitting out a game, and if it largely changed the outlook of that series, right? But I think that since that time, the NBA has been very, very favorable to allowing Draymond to be Draymond. And I don't think that that's fair, to especially in high stake games like this, because Draymond understands that. Draymond knows that. And granted, I think there was years where Draymond was getting unnecessary technical fouls, but to level of where he's going now, he's doing things that he deserves not to be there anymore. And I think that that affected game two. And honestly, it affects the outcome of the whole series, because he did some stuff that warranted him leaving the game. And he is now being rewarded for it and being able to stay out on the court with his team.
Yeah, he definitely walks the fine line of being ejected and getting technical fouls pretty much all the time. And by doing so, it gives him the reputation of being that type of player, which when refs see it, if it's not blatantly crazy or absurd, they're gonna let it slide. And then as well as we see with the other stuff of him not getting ejected in one of those games, it's like I'm sure as a ref you don't wanna you understand how influential that decision is, and it's not just a foul or anything like that. It pretty much changes the game. And as a ref, you probably don't want to influence the game in that kind of way. So definitely I guess expected there. And kind of the same thing happens a lot with like defensive players. So if you see especially someone like Marcus Smart, he has that reputation of being super physical and just a really good defensive player. Same thing with Patrick Beverly. We see it all the time. And if you watch these guys actually defend compared to everyone else, since they just kind of have that reputation, they get away with a lot more than your average defensive player. And maybe they hit someone's hand real quick, but like, they're just going to be all over you. And at least that's something that I've observed that happens pretty often, that if you have that defensive reputation, get away with a lot more. Draymond has the reputation of being like that kind of very physical player. So he's going to get away with it a lot more than anyone else. Um, yeah, this whole series is pretty intriguing. I think I said six before. I can very easily see. Uh, I still would say Warriors, but I'm gonna say Warriors in seven now.
All right, I agree.
Um,
Well, I don't agree, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
agree on the
yeah.
pick of the team.
Just because I mean, hey, I mean, these Celtics, they definitely surprised me a lot more. I was still I was talking to somebody about it. I think it was when the Celtics were up 2-1. I was not confident. I'm like, I'm still going with the Warriors, but I did not feel confident at all in that. Now I feel a little better about it, but we'll see how this turns out. Um, do you want to move on to our next topic?
Yep. So I'll go over the list of players that gonna make headwaves in this 2022 free agency class. The first five players that I'll go over, and I'll just go one name at a time, are players that have player options. We'll go over if we think that they should pick up or drop their player option, and then decide from there. And then go into predictions of where we think that they will go if they don't pick up their player options, and go from there, Brian.
Yeah, man, sounds good. Let's do it.
Perfect. So, first person to start off this list is no other than the man that has been sitting out the whole season. He is getting very close to, I think, by the time of free agency, which will be July 1st, I believe it is, the moratorium period starts. John Wall is is going to be turning 32 around that time, and he's still with the Houston Rockets. But he has player option that is the value of $42 million, arguably very close to $43 million. Do you think he picks up this player option, or he drops this player option and becomes a free agent this season?
Man, John Wall is this man is just pulled a robbery on the entire NBA. I just looked at it. In the last 4 years, he's played 72 games in total. In 4 years, that is completely absurd. He knows he's never getting another payday like this. He's easily picking this up. It's not even a question. He's picking up that 40 almost $43 million player option.
I agree. I do think that he's going to pick up this option as well. Where I feel bad about this situation is that John Wall, it's not by his own
Yeah.
volition that he's choosing to sit out this season. It was the team felt that for the development of the team that it was better that he wasn't around or able to play in this season. So they sat him out. And, just I wanted to add something that I was thinking about when you were mentioning Al Horford in the segment, is that Jalen Rose actually recently on an interview was discussing how he believed that players nowadays, teams are valuing them a little bit different, and seeing the long term asset and reasons why they could sit out a player, or why they value players rather than in a year to year sense, but for more of a preservation sense of being able to keep this guy a little bit longer, because the value of these contracts, you would rather to have these guys over 10 years than over just a 1 or 2 year situation. And because of that, you're seeing the situations where I don't care if a guy misses out a whole season, or if a guy sits out a whole season. And that conversation was stemmed a lot from, rather than even just that, was from talking about like the shortening of the season. But it was a big proponent of why you're seeing this. So that's where I feel for John Wall in this situation. But he would be really, really dumb to turn down
Yeah.
this free money, because I I assume they're going to do the same thing at the start of the season and try to see if they could offload him around the trade deadline. I wonder if they're going to be very helpful with trying to facilitate bringing him to where he wants to be rather than just choosing whoever wants to pick up John Wall at that point. Because I think that that's important for Houston as well to be seen as a team that plays ball with the players to help them making their decisions of where they want to go.
I'm very curious. So one, agree with everything you're saying. So let's just say John Wall hypothetically declines his player option. How much would you? How much is fair value for John Wall? How much would you pay him in the
I think
offseason?
I think if he turns that down, that payday, he's
Yeah,
seeing at least 3/4 of that money being taken away from him, and it would be tragic. He's never going to get paid like that again.
yeah,
And if you have a chance to take it one more time, take it is what I would say.
yeah. Would
You
you?
know,
Yeah.
honestly, I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
One, this conversation about John Wall is going to be something that's very pivotal about other individuals on this list
Yeah.
that I wanted to speak about as well too.
Would you? Who would you rather pay more money, John Wall or Jalen Brunson in the offseason? Like,
I think
just
at this present moment, because we haven't seen John Wall in so long, you got to say Jalen Brunson. Um, Obviously, he's 32. There's no
yeah,
such thing as a ceiling anymore. We know what type of player he's going to be. I think you get comparable type of game from both of them, but longevity wise, Jalen Brunson gives you a lot more than John Wall would at this point in his career.
okay. Would you pay if you could have Jay or John Wall on your team? Would you pay him $20 million?
Would it?
Yeah, you would not. How much? What do you? 15?
Fair value in the market right
Yeah.
now is around 12, 15, like you're saying.
Whoa. Okay. I would probably go closer to like. Honestly, I think he's probably worth closer to like 18 or so. It's just the scary thing is the injury because we keep saying like John Wall, he's not a bad player. I mean, he's a fantastic player. The only thing is he's generally not a player that can play a whole lot because of injuries. When he does play, he does perform very well. He probably if when he does play, I'd say I'd even give him like $26 million. Like, like I'd give him a decent amount if he could play all the time. That's the problem. He definitely can't. So,
And
I think yeah, yeah,
that's why I say fair value puts me at 12, 15. You just said it. He had a staggering 72 games in about 4 years. It's not even a full season in
yeah,
4 years. So it that already is caution, red flags for me.
yeah. That is out of 318 games he could have played, he played 72. That is
That's ridiculous.
yeah. That's really bad. And
That's
that's
not
yeah.
counting. That's not counting playoffs. If
Oh
there was
yeah.
playoff games in that situation as well too.
I took into actually maybe it might be a little bit less. I was gonna say I took into account the one season where we had less games, but then we also had the COVID season where things were cut off a little bit earlier. It's around 300 games, but still, um, we talked about John Wall way longer than I'd ever thought. Like, let's move on to the next guy.
All right, the next guy is actually over 32, heading into 33 at this point. Forced his way out of Brooklyn this season. Had a stellar start to when he joined his new team, but as has been the theme for his career, expectations start to wane when the playoffs come, and he made a lot of people in Philly upset. But this guy is due for a player option that is of the same value as John Wall. Just let that sink in. Do you think that this man takes James Harden? Do you think James Harden picks up his player option or he drops it? this offseason?
So I think it really depends on the kind of agreement that him and the Philadelphia 76ers have. Because, I mean, we saw beforehand that James Harden tried to sign that giant extension. It's just that he was too late. So now he's in this scenario where I would imagine Philadelphia would beg that he picks this up. So then in the following year, they don't have to pay him as much if he underperforms and all that. I think he is, depending on the conversations that go on the back end, if they can come up with a 4-year max contract, a 5-year max, whatever it is, he declines it. But if there is kind of no agreement, I think he might pick it up. I mean, he would pick it up. But like, what do you think in that scenario? Like, James Harden's a very tricky guy.
I think he's dropping it as soon as he possibly could. I know he hasn't done it already.
Yeah.
I think the last day they can do is June 29th, for all of these players that we're going to mention. But I think he drops it because he still may believe that he has fair value in the market to garnish a supermax type of extension. And being that his boy, I forgot his name right now, but the basketball operations,
Daryl Morey.
Daryl Morey is the head of the helm in Philly now. I think he's going to get every cent that he thinks he's owed. He's going to be the first 60 million NBA player in a few years, 60 million a year NBA player in a few years, and you know there's really nothing. They've already tied themselves to him. There's nothing much you could say to it. And I don't think that he would ever put himself in a situation where he feels like he has a show me year. Like I think he feels that I've done enough. I've done enough in this league to prove that I deserve a max, even if I'm struggling. And he feels that his struggles are warranted because of injuries. He believes that he doesn't have to prove anything to anyone, and he's going to do so, and by declining. And honestly, I wouldn't say that this would happen, but it could be very interesting if this gets contentious, where Daryl Morey decides, you know what, I have had a change in heart about how I feel about Harden, and I wanna lowball him. I could see him trying to find a way where he's like, oh, you're gonna lowball me now, and I'm going to make this interesting by talking to other teams now.
Yeah, I'm even curious of, definitely it's different in the Kyrie Irving situation where like I think other teams will still 100% want James Harden. Do they want the overweight James Harden that goes to strip clubs and all that? I don't know, but yeah, it's a weird situation, but he's just has not performed in the playoffs. Always getting injured now. Like you're saying, he's about to be 33. I mean, we did just see Chris Paul just get a max contract, but if you looked at the finer details of it, when he turns 40 or whatever, like I think that last year is not guaranteed, and there's a lot of more kind of safeguards on the Suns' end. But even then, like you see Chris Paul actually performing at that age versus James Harden.
Great.
Do you? So I think you had the good point of there. I think there's like an 80% chance that he's dropping that as soon as he can, and then if there's some other like background like tomfoolery, then maybe it gets interesting. But most likely, this man's gonna drop it inside the supermax.
I think it would be very shocking
Yeah.
to see him go, because I think that changes the whole viewpoint of what everybody feels about this trade as well too.
Yes.
That he helped facilitate. So I think he's gonna be a Sixer next season.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
There's not a lot of options
Another
otherwise.
Great. Another player on this list of the players with player options, probably arguably the one with the most question marks, after a lackluster season with the the Lakers this season. A lot of the blame has been pushed over to him. Granted, I don't think he's warranted all of them, all of the faults,
Hmm.
but it was glaring how people felt about this individual as he made a homecoming to a team where he grew up from. Um, he had an inefficient season, something that he's kind of been used to uh, in the last couple of years. But nevertheless, he's in place for a player option, and that player is Russell Westbrook, where this summer he's going to have to decide if he's going to pick up or drop his option for roughly around 41 million dollars. Brian, does he pick up or does he drop this option?
I think this is a pretty quick and easy one. Easily gonna pick this one up. This is kind of the same situation as John Wall. We've seen them get traded for each other, and then there's conversations again of them almost being traded again for each other. Very comparable. I would actually rather have Westbrook. It's kind of crazy. I'm looking at this now. Westbrook is older than John Wall. Like I did not actually know that. Um, he's 2 years older than him. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, nah, he's gonna pick that up easy.
Think I need to add anything to that. That's probably the easiest thing to say. Good luck, Lakers.
Yeah.
All right. So the next name on this list is probably arguably the guy that has the least amount of question marks on the players that have a player option this season. Um, Another season of lackluster basketball and actually teammates with the guy that we just previously mentioned. Um, After another lackluster season with the Washington Wizards, he sees himself with a big decision to make this offseason where he has a $35 million player option, and that player is Bradley Beal. Does he pick up this option or does he drop this option, Brian?
I think I actually have not looked at like if it's more advantageous money wise when there's a new deal and all that stuff, but I think he probably just drops it and then just signs a bigger contract and just get a max contract. No matter where Bradley Beal, if he didn't even sign with the Wizards, he would get a max contract no matter where. Um, I think he's because at the moment he's getting $35 million. I'd probably even look what the max. Do you know what the max is on the top of your head if Bradley Beal was going to sign a new contract? Because if so, it just makes sense. It makes sense financially for him. He would get a significant amount more money rather than just pick up and play for $35 million this year.
I think I don't know the figures. I will
Yeah.
say, um, but I think you're right. He would be eligible for 5 years, $246 million supermax is the option that he would be able to pick up. So
So it's about $50 million. So he would.
yeah.
It's 49. So yeah, he would essentially be losing $14 million if he picks up this option.
So I agree. I think that he gets out of the player option, and but you ready?
Oh, word.
Got some shocking. I got some shocking news for you, Brian.
Okay,
I
okay.
think if this happens, just say you heard it from Jeff first. We know there's a team that likes to take home run shots at points,
Okay.
because they have someone at the helm that likes taking risks, and time he has taken chances on risk, and he has positively benefited from it. So I see that John Wall, Bradley Beal drops his option, and he decides, He's going to look at that supermax and he is going to say, this will be the best option that I have. I don't think he's going to outright sign to one team.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be facilitated in a sign and trade where he still gets that supermax money, but he makes his way to the Miami Heat. And I think that pieces that would be moved in that conversation would be obviously a lot of players would be on the table. You have Duncan Robinson on not a favorable contract, but on a contract that's big enough to help with facilitating this. You have guys like I think Tyler Hero has to be the centerpiece of this whole trade. There's a lot of people thinking that Donovan Mitchell trade makes sense more, but I think that he actually fits in a lot better into what Miami might need a little bit more in play style. I don't think his game's relatively that much different than the Donovan Mitchell, but I think that where he is in his career, he may be a little hungrier than where Donovan Mitchell is in his career, with wanting to win a championship. And I think that pairing, his mindset always, it screams to me that he would fit in very well with Jimmy Butler. And I think that now your third option or your second option is not going to be a guy that's coming off the bench. Mm-hmm. And I've always said that I felt that the issues of why I could not regard Tyler Hero the same level as a lot of other players, our critics would put him, is that he is doing phenomenal numbers, but he's doing it on relatively lesser talent that he's going up against, being a six man. He's playing everyone's second team. Yes, he's still playing the same amount of minutes as a typical starter, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's always playing the starters, right? So I think for those reasons, it would be advantageous for Miami to continue in the way how they've done in the past and go for that big home run and bring in a guy like Bradley Beal to their team this offseason.
I really like the fit. I think if they can do that, which I think that's a very like Miami move. I can 100% see it happening. Where like my predictions kind of gonna go, even though we did just have Bradley Beal over the weekend on the Taylor Rooks podcast talking about like, oh, I'm gonna go wherever I have the best chance to win and all that. I personally feel like I've been hearing Bradley Beal say that over the last like 4 years. I think he says that every offseason, and then next thing you know, he goes, oh, I love Washington, this is my place, blah blah blah, and he ends up staying. I'm a believe it till I see it kind of guy. I think Bradley Beal is just gonna stay with the Wizards. It's he's just gonna get his money paid, and he's gonna be as similar to like a Dame, where this man's just gonna stay with his team. He's loyal. He wants to be there, and probably never gonna win a whole lot. So that's my prediction. Bradley Beal, get your money. You do all that. I would love to see him in Miami. I think that'd be really cool.
Good. I really do think that.
Yeah.
That's a match made in heaven for them.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so now, lastly on the list of guys that can pick up a player option, the most controversial on this list is coming off a season where his team had high hopes with a pairing of the big three at the big season that they would be contending for a finals, but quickly that was altered when decisions beyond the team, beyond the league were made with the local municipalities, that a decision that would alter the fate of not just this individual, but ultimately the team and how their season would play out. During that time, saw injuries from their top option, their number one option and superstar, seeing missing time in the during the season, and then their other superstar becoming disgruntled with the situation of the pair of now dealing with the COVID mandates affecting this player and the injuries sustained to their superstar, made his decision and James Harden to leave the team via trade during the trade deadline. Um, this led to this individual eventually at some point making it back to the court, but not soon enough where it made a big enough impact for them to affect their seeding and be in a more favorable situation where they were easily handled in the playoffs by the Boston Celtics. And that player is Kyrie Irving, who has a $34 million player option. And does he pick up this option or does he drop this option? The question
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah, I think so for the listeners, Jeff and I are in a group chat with a bunch of other friends. We have one friend that's he has a very strong opinion on this. I think we need to get him on this pod, and then we have the conversation about if how things should go down. But just to lay it out, I think essentially with Kyrie Irving right now, it's very similar to what Bradley Beal kind of has in his situation where no matter where he goes, or maybe not no matter where he goes, but this guy is going to get his money. He's going to get his money, and depending, he's not going to be playing for Kyrie Irving's not going to be playing for $34 million next year. That's not going to be happening. He's going to be getting paid a lot more. So financially, it makes no sense for him to pick up this player option. So he's going to deny it. But I think he's just going to re-sign the max with the Nets. What do you think, Jeff?
I am in 100% agreement with you. You know, what you brought up about John Wall, us discussing Russell Westbrook, even taking the likes of guys like Bradley Beal into full spectrum, into looking at the our superstars, our stars spectrum across the league. It is due for him to at least feel that he needs a more favorable amount in the marketplace. The reason why I say this as well too is now using the contrast of John Wall, like you mentioned, is John Wall is significantly making more money
Yeah.
than Kyrie Irving year over year these last couple of years. And he has played about roughly 40, 50 less games. And and granted, one of those years was an anomaly, was
Yeah.
not a situation that anyone could foresee. No one could ch- uh, dis, you know, really have predicted that that would have happened. The biggest it's interesting too because when you look at the blemishes that people will say is there for to call out why Kyrie shouldn't get this, is you're using the anomaly, and then you're using a 2 week span that he checked out. And granted, never we probably never seen this in uh, the whole NBA history. But granted, if from his whole career, when has he ever dealt or done something like that before? So for him having or feeling he needed to do that, I think granted, it may not feel as it was the right decision at the time, or the media has made it to look as the worst thing he could have done. I still believe there has to be a reason why he decided to do that, and it couldn't have been to self sabotage. So I am not as opposed to the fact that he did that. I am upset that it had to happen, but I'm human, obviously. I'm going to feel some type of way about the fact that he disappears for 2 weeks, but it's being that it's only happened once in his whole career does not lead me to believe that this is going to be a reoccurring thing that should be happening in this next contract if he is given it. So because of that, I think it is the right time for him to get the max dollars that he can get in the market when you see your contemporaries that are not even at the same level as you are garnishing more money than you. And we're talking about a guy that if he didn't sit off this season, you look at the work body of last season, the man had 27 points per game shooting off of a 50-40-90 split. It was arguably his best season ever. It was arguably one of the best seasons in the league ever as well. So it's it would be very unfortunate if they decide not to pick up, not to re-sign him, and allow for him to make his own decision on where he wants to go. But I don't think that there's a thought in my mind that he's going to pick up this player option.
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty simple of like Kyrie Irving the talent, easily max player. Not even a question. Kyrie Irving the person, you can get a little bit questionable about this and like do you really do you trust him and this and that, and maybe there's some injury stuff there like you have your question marks, but at the end of the day he has the talent for it, and it's just there is no better option. You slide him to that max contract, you do it like I said before. I really want to get on our friend Richter. He has very strong feeling as to Kyrie should never be trusted and all this. It would be a very fun conversation. That has to happen soon. We have to talk to him about that. But yeah, I think this is pretty just black and white for now. On our end, we see it as black and white. He sees it a little different. There's a conversation to be had.
I'll add something to the mix of this as well too. Is that the biggest part about this conversation is that NBA has gotten to a point where the money that they have to facilitate to these players has handicapped every single team to start the season or go through a period where they're significantly over the cap space.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm looking at the situation. There's realistically probably 4 teams that has cap space to sign a guy. None of those guys have the cap space, unless if they want to go over the cap to potentially pick up Kyrie. Actually, there's only 3 teams. I just looked at it. The 3 teams are the Blazers, it's the Spurs, it's the Pacers. Actually, there's 4 teams. I'm sorry. The Pistons. I lied again. There's 5 teams, and the Magics. Do you think any of those teams would garnish the interest from Kyrie Irving?
Yeah.
No. like the easiest answer is no. None of them would. Even they have the ability, though they have the ability to outright sign him, they do not garnish the interest of what I think Kyrie would want in his career right now. And I think this is just going to this is going to continue to be an issue for the league because of how the market values of players have gone up significantly over the years, and the reasons why even some players our teams are coming up to argue that there's an unfair advantage of teams like the Warriors that are significantly benefiting from the money that they've been able to garnish being in 6 championships in the last 8 years, to be able to, even though they're massively over the cap, they could pay off those that luxury tax.
Yeah, there's the repeater tax and everything, so they're paying so much. But yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. Yeah, I don't see Kyrie going anywhere, and if it would ever be anything, it'd definitely have to be like a signing trade and all that, because like you're saying, he's not going to any of those teams. So I think that's the end of the story there.
The next five guys, I guess we could go rapid fire
Yeah.
on these guys. Now we don't need to mention that they don't have player options. So, first guy is going to be probably the guy, the biggest name on the market that doesn't have a player option is Zach Levine. Where do you think he goes, Brian? Does he stay or does he leaves for another team?
I this one's kind of tough. At one hand, it's like, does he leave after what Chicago has done? After all this, like they traded their entire future to put a team around him for him to stay. That team did not perform super well. They were, at least they were hoping to be championship contenders. They were definitely pretenders. So they kind of have no avenue to get better. They did have a lot of injuries on the team. I think it's probably Zach Levine's best bet. And what my prediction is, I think he's just gonna stay in the Bulls. I think he's gonna stay in the Bulls. I think he's gonna stay there. But my fantasy prediction is if he can go to the Spurs and play with DeJounte Murray, because DeJounte Murray is probably one of my favorite players, and I would love to see him and Zach Levine tear it up in San Antonio. What about you,
All
Jeff?
right, perfect. I actually thought about the Spurs as well, based off what you were saying. But I think there's two halves to the story, and it kind of goes to what you were mentioning as well too. Is that does he want to rub people the wrong way
Yeah.
with the being the beloved player that he's been these last couple of years, being able to come up into NBA stardom, the level that he's gotten to at this point, and stay with the Chicago Bulls, or the other option that I think is glaringly has been something that this team has been trying to facilitate, and the reason why I think they've offloaded some of the contracts that they had in this last year is be I wouldn't say perceived bad, but you would be perceived bad in Chicago, is leaving to go to Portland Trailblazers is where I think that ultimately will do a very very hard look at that situation. Granted, I think it looks like the Blazers have around 21 million cap space, but obviously they would go
Yeah.
over the cap to get them to the number that they want to get. And I think they probably offer obviously the they have bird rights, so Chicago has will be the able to give him the most money possible. But I think that thing with Dame is a lot more intriguing than running it back with this team because just don't see it happening with the Bulls. And it's crazy how it went full circle. We had our reservations last season about the
Mhm.
Bulls, and we saw how in the middle of the season they really shocked us all, and we thought that they would be on the top of the helm of the East, and then they started to cool down, and they went right back to where our expectations thought that they would be. So because of that, I could see him deeply looking at a situation with with the Trailblazers over staying with the Bulls and trying to do something with Dame, where you have a West that, let's be honest, is not the West that we grew up to love. There's definitely space for players to grow, I mean, teams to grow and be a fixture on the top of it. You have a Freeney Simmons coming into form. You have Dame coming back off of an injury, and you potentially get Zach Levine. I think that's a lot more favorable big three than the one that they have on the Bulls.
It I kind of feel like it's pretty comparable, just because of. Well, one, just if you look at three people versus three people on, or three people on the Trailblazers, if Zach Levine was there, versus three people on the Bulls, if Zach Levine's there, I definitely would take the Trailblazers talent. But it's just like you think about everyone else on that team, and Vucevic, Lonzo Ball, even Caruso, Patrick Williams, all those guys, Io DeSumo, whatever. He was doing extremely well this year. Like there's so many other good players on that team versus on the Blazers. There really isn't a whole lot of talent there. There really after you go with Dame and Simons, like you really don't have a lot. So that's
Josh
where it
Hart's
gets tough.
still there, right? Josh
Josh,
Hart's still there.
I feel like Josh Hart was like a throw in with the with the CJ trade, and you have Yusuf Nurkic who is also like a free agent guy, but like other than that, you have what, Larry Nance. Would do you rather have Larry Nance or Patrick Williams as your four? Like, yeah,
No, I think Larry Nance moved on too.
did he?
He moved on in the Pelicans trade,
Oh, he's wait. So Larry Nance is
so they
at the
don't even have
Pelicans.
that.
Oh wait, wow. He
Yes.
don't, yeah, that is true. You're right. That was a mess up. Wow. So yeah, they don't even have like they traded Robert Covington. They traded all these guys. Like this team, they traded Norman Powell. They don't have anyone else anymore. So that's where it's kind of confusing when, especially when someone like Zach Levine, if you're leaving a good situation to go to the Blazers, doesn't make sense in my opinion. I would love to see it. I would love to see it, but I don't know if that's gonna happen there. But we'll see. I have somebody else on my mind that I like is a better fit for the Blazers.
All right, perfect. So next name is Gary Harris. He does he stay or does he go, Brian?
I think, well, one, I mean, he's getting paid a decent amount of money. He's getting paid 21 million dollars, and I was looking at before, he's averaging just 11 points. He's mainly a scorer. Like Gary Harris is not the player that he was in Denver anymore. It's pretty sad. I think he kind of have to let him go. Or one, I think he should go. Orlando has such a backlog of guards. You have like you want to make room for what, Jalen Suggs. You have Markel Fultz, who's been pretty decent over there. You have Cole Anthony. Like you have so many guys. It makes no sense, especially to re-sign Gary Harris for that amount of money or anything like that. Where does Gary Harris go? This where I was kind of struggling for a bit. I kind of feel like I'd like to see him with the Pacers. And I kind of like the fit with Gary Harris and Tyrese Halliburton, especially like Tyrese Halliburton running the point guard. Well, one, I'm in this scenario. I'm thinking if they move away from Malcolm Brogdon, but I like Tyrese Halliburton's height allows him to play with some other more combo guards like a Gary Harris, and I kind of like how that could look a little bit there. What do you think about Gary Harris?
Yeah, I just don't think he's gonna get much in the market.
Yeah,
We're in
not
an
much.
age where there's a lot of guards that are
Yeah,
pulling in top money, and I think that almost every team has a talented guard on their team. I
yeah,
think he's going to fit into being a mid-level exception for most teams,
true.
and where I could see that happening are him potentially finding a home. Is you mentioned, I think you said the Pacers, is
Yeah, I
that
said the
correct?
Pacers.
Not the Pacers, I could see him very well being like a player option. I mean, a mid-level exception for a team like the Raptors. I think that fits the type of player who he is, or the defensive side of the player who he is, and I think it wouldn't take too long for him to fit into that team
Yep.
and potentially be a key person in the cog.
Yeah, I mean he's not 6'8" and super long arms, but no, I do really like that fit for the Raptors. I can also see him like just being one of those guys that we see like the Lakers or maybe even the Nets picking up. Like you see some championship contenders, like you got some guy, you have some extra room. Gary Harris is not going to get a lot of money. Like if you want to throw your mid-level exception at him, then go ahead. I can see that.
Next player is Joe Angles. Does he stay? Does he leave, even though he hasn't played a minute in Portland?
This one's a little bit tough. I personally would like him to stay in Portland, like as Portland tries to build up their team, get even better. Like they have his bird rights and everything. Like he's a good player, and you want to have him on your team. I think that's a good spot where you can start building. So I think Portland should definitely try to keep Joe Ingles as much as they can. But would he want to stay? He probably wants to go to a team that wants to win a little bit more, even though Portland is trying to do a win now situation. What do you think about Joe Ingles?
I think he's at a premium right now. Every team's typically is really looking for a guy that does what he does. I could see him trying to get into a situation where he gets. I don't think he gets Joe Harris numbers, or even Duncan Robinson numbers, but possibly in the space of 14, 17 mil a year. I think he either stays at Portland or he finds himself on a potential contender. I'm trying to think of who realistically I think he fits in with. I think if the Bulls lose the opportunity of bringing back Zach Levine, obviously not the same type of player, but definitely helps fill out the roster a little bit better and ultimately might be better for the team in filling out if they lose Zach Levine, filling out the team to be more well-rounded rather than being very top heavy on those three players that ultimately none of those three players you would 100% say are superstars, even if they have sparks and moments where you feel that they are.
Yeah, I do kind of like that with Chicago and all that, but I agree that he's gonna get paid a decent amount, like a small premium. He was already to like 13 million beforehand, so definitely nothing too crazy there.
Next player on the list. I just had the name and I just lost it. Oh, our good friend, TJ Warren. Where do you think TJ Warren lands?
This one. It's I don't know, like TJ Warren's he really hasn't done a whole lot in his career. He's been injured so much, which is really sad. He has during the bubble, he went off and he was insane and it was so good. But other than that, we haven't really seen much from TJ Warren. Um, this is kind of one where it's also a little bit tricky of like it's the likelihood of him staying is probably there just because they need some help with just small forwards in general at Indiana. I don't know if I would also kind of like to see him in Sacramento. I think that'd be kind of nice, especially with them losing or trading away Buddy Hield. I think if TJ Warren can kind of come back up, they need some really strong 3-point shooting. That's what I would like to see from TJ Warren. What about you?
I agree. I think that's a good team as well. Another one that I put on the table as well is once again the Raptors is another team that I think he fits into pretty well, helping them space out the floor. Obviously, they have I forgot his name, but he plays shooting guard. They just got him from Portland.
Oh, Gary Trent.
Gary Trent, yep. So, but Gary Trent is still very undersized to be in that forward role.
Yeah.
So I would say like bringing in a guy like TJ Warren helps out in their situation. And there's been rumors that are rumblings about OG not being happy with his situation or potentially being moved. So I think that that would be a good replacement if they do wind up losing OG in any situation. Um, so yeah, those two teams. I think the Pacers. In my mind, I think the Pacers rubbed him the wrong way
Yeah.
with the situation with bringing in.
Karis.
Um,
Or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, bringing in Karis LeVert earlier in the season, and that could have rubbed him the wrong way, and he might not feel wanted or appreciated by the team. Where he's not now, like I want to test the markets.
Yeah. I would definitely like to see him in Toronto. I think Toronto definitely is pretty like a one just an awesome destination to go to because they have so much talent. I think they can do some pretty cool things with trades, especially if like OG wants to leave or anything like that.
And then the last name on our list, old guy, but I wanted to throw him into this list, Carmelo Anthony. What do you think he does? Does he stay? Does he retire? Gotta add that one now too.
Yeah.
Retire, or does he move elsewhere?
uh so Carmelo Anthony, I definitely as a Knicks fan, I have like a weird relationship with Melo of especially I think very early on I kind of noticed like there's no way the Knicks are ever going to win with Melo as the number one option. So I kind of has a little bit of hate there, but the guy wants to come to New York, you know, I gotta like him for that. But so one, he's not gonna make a lot of money. He hasn't throughout his entire I guess since leaving really New York and going to OKC and all that. Not gonna make a lot of money. I kind of would like to see the reunion, not with the Knicks, but with Portland, especially especially since they're trying to win a lot more now. I like him with Dame there, but yeah, he's not going back to the Lakers. That was a mess. I the other kind of thought I had, I would like to see him kind of with Brooklyn in a sense. Like I don't want to see him with the Knicks. I just don't. But but I think he'd be kind of fun. I know Brooklyn, you guys don't have the best relationship or I guess luck with bringing in some of these older guys that like Blake Griffin and Paul Millsap and all this. Lamarcus Aldridge wasn't terrible, but like I kind of like to see him like come back there and look pretty nice. What do you think?
I agree. I think that guys like this, like Carmelo Millsap, you mentioned, Blake Griffin, there's a reason why they're at this stage in their career
Yep.
where they're not garnishing top dollars anymore, which means that you can't rely on them heavily. But those are the type of guys you do still need on your team, and why I think I agree. I think that a New York reunion is in line for him, um, whether it be with the Nets or the Knicks. Nostalgic wise, people will want it to be the Knicks. I know
Yeah.
you don't want it, but people would want it if it's like a last ride situation with him.
Yeah.
But I think that he is kind of like a match made in heaven like situation for the Nets, being a guy that is potentially a wing to not pick up a lot of minutes, but
Yeah.
be a burst of offense off of the bench for the Nets. He would be helpful. Uh, and then just, the type of emotion that would come with bringing a player like that to your situation. So like let's say he does have a game that he goes off, that could sway a game for the Nets when they're in a title contending like situation that they're in. We look back at some of those Miami Heat teams, and some of those players were around the same age, um, made their biggest impact to help Miami win the championship. You look at the Mike Millers, you look at the Ray Allens, you look at the Mike Bibbies of the world. All of those guys impacted those Heat teams and helped them, but they weren't asked for too much. And that's where I think a lot of, like you mentioned, Blake Griffin, Paul Millsap. And you're asking too much of those guys. You're not going to see old Paul Millsap, or you're not going to see old Blake Griffin in that situation. So that's why they look not too amazing. So finding a happy balance and potentially him being on Brooklyn, I think that works for him.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I kind of think about it, not exactly the same, but like we saw how impactful I think Jeff Green was for the Nets, and like if Melo can kind of just be like that spot up guy in the corner, do the dirty work. He's a good rebounder. Like, what more can you ask? Like that's a nice guy to have on some low minimum contract.
I agree. You know what? It's great that you brought up Jeff Green, because Jeff Green in that season started to become like the heart and soul of the Nets.
Yeah.
And I think in ways, Carmelo has found ways to be that when he was in Portland. I don't think that they
Yeah.
very well needed that when he was on the Lakers. But I think on a team like the Nets, he helps galvanize some of those second unit guys. And he doesn't need to do that for Kyrie or KD or Ben Simmons, but he helps galvanize a lot of those guys and put them in the right headspace to the type of players that they need to be,
Yeah.
for the team.
And I would like to see it, I guess, as a Knicks fan too, of just like, I think a lot of people like to see Carmelo Anthony get a ring, puts him in a good position. The Knicks is just not a good position for him, especially as like they just don't have any room. We don't want to play any more old guys. We just want to develop young guys because we're not going to win any games. And as nice as it would be, like Melo ending his career, I think we've seen so many reports. I saw someone on Twitter talk about this of like the last like 4 to 5 years. Around this time, there's always a Carmelo Anthony to the New York Knicks reunion, and like that kind of post all the time. We see it every year. I don't see it. I would like to see it with Brooklyn though. That'd be nice. I know you said this is the last guy. I did actually have one other guy I wanted to talk about, especially because since he's a
All
bigger
right.
name, even though he's not a complete free agent, he's a restricted free agent. He he was the number one pick. I'm not even gonna go crazy about it. It's DeAndre Ayton. What do you think about DeAndre Ayton? Where does he go? What does he do? Does he resign? What do you think?
I think the speculation's out there. There, I've seen some reports that are saying they're gonna let him like walk, potentially. I don't think that the Suns are that dumb. Like, as much as disappointing the playoffs were, where the Mavs wound up winning the series, you don't give up on that right now. I think they're trying to play hardball with him. And granted, I don't think it's warranted. I don't think he's a supermax player either, or but I don't even think he's up for the supermax. I think he's just for a simple extension. I think they should give it to him, and I think that there is going to be some team that decides to throw an anchor in on this. And ironically, I think that team might be the Dallas Mavericks that throws the wrench in their plans, and forces the Suns to match that contract, because he is exactly what the Mavs need and are looking for in the market. So if they could throw a wrench in them and mess with them one more last time in 2022 before the next season, that's where I see could be the situation.
I think well, I definitely agree with your thought process of they should just re-sign him, even though like he's not really a max player, at least yet. The way that they're using him, he's not. That last playoff runs, not this season, but the one previously, he looked every bit of a max player. This one, not really. There's talking about like him quitting on the team and all that other stuff, and there's all the drama. I don't think he goes back to the team. I think it's gonna be a sign and trade, which I mean, If they let him walk, that'd be ridiculous. You can't let your former number one pick walk. But you do a sign and trade, especially when you took him over Luca. But you do a sign and trade, and where I'm kind of thinking, and I've heard there was this week there was a Blazers guy on like a Knicks podcast I listened to, and he really kind of got me thinking of DeAndre Ayton to the Blazers. That's one of their top options that they're going to try to go after. They're going to go pretty hard after him. What do they trade? That's another question. I mean, you do have Yusuf Nurkic there. Probably, if you think about it, for the Suns who don't want to pay DeAndre Ayton as much money, you kind of just pay Yusuf Nurkic just less. And the way that they're using DeAndre Ayton, you're kind of getting the same results, I would say. And then for the Blazers, you get a really young guy who has the talent there, play with Dame. I kind of like that. DeAndre Ayton's really good in the mid-range. That's where I kind of think where they were going. That's where I rather them, if you're a Blazers person, I rather you have DeAndre Ayton on that team versus getting like Zach Levine there, just because you already have that backcourt already set. I'd rather you have DeAndre Ayton. What do you think?
I was gonna say, is there a realistic way where they could get all three to pair it into? Like you have the Dame, have the Ayton, and then you have Zach Levine come in and sign. That I think is very compelling at that point. I know Josh Hart is a 20 mil guy. So if you could offload that contract, that puts them around 40 mil in in uh in the salary, cap space that they have, right? If they move that contract, in that potential trade that you're saying. But does it give them enough time to convince a guy like Zach Levine to sign outright? Because then, like I mentioned, they may not be able to offer him the most money, but that's compelling. That's a lot more compelling if you're able to offload Hart's contract, move Nurkic as well over to the Suns. It keeps the Suns still competitive as well. Bringing a guy like Josh Hart and Nurkic, even though he has his injury issues, possibly, even consider moving Joe Ingles, sign and trade that way as well too. But it sounds like there's a lot of complicated stuff that has to happen to make that sign and trade happen. But still, if you're able to make way where you make the path to build a big three on that team with those three guys, I don't hate that big three.
I don't hate that either. The Blazers guy that I was listening to, who sounded pretty credible about like that the information that he's heard in the past that turned out to be true versus like what he's hearing now. It's like their number one guy that they're going very hard after is OG from the Raptors, and then their number two guy is Ayton, and that's where they're really looking at. If they can somehow pull that, I like that as well. But I would like that Zach Levine pairing. The logistics feel a little bit hard for them to get there, but hey, if they can do that, now I can feel like, hey, especially with the Blazers, they have the number 7th pick, so like they got a little bit of assets and all that. So we'll see what they could actually do at the end of the day. I think this was actually a pretty fun, I guess, topic. At least talking about these free agents. I would like to see at the end of this, when everyone signs, we pull up what were our thoughts and then how did they actually pan out. That'd be pretty fun. Do you want to move on? Rapid fire weekly roundup. I mean, we always go a little bit longer than I thought. We're an hour and 30 in already, but let's do some rapid fire. So, number 1, what are your thoughts on the report from Shams that Kenny Atkinson, your boy from Brooklyn, is signing as the head coach of the Hornets. What do you think about that?
I'm happy for him that he gets this new opportunity. Definitely warranted. I think he's a pretty good developmental coach. I think that's exactly what the Hornets kind of need.
Mhm.
They have the talent. We've seen them make a run for those play-ins a couple of years. There's a couple of years it felt like they would do even better than just getting into the play-ins. Obviously, the East is a lot more stacked nowadays, but I think that this is the right coach to right the ship for LaMelo and his maturation. Get Miles Bridges into a better player, are rounding into the right player for this team as well, and A plus on the hire
Yeah.
to me.
I'm a big fan of Kenny Atkinson. I did want the Knicks to hire Kenny Atkinson over Tom Thibodeau. So I do really like this fit for the Hornets. Um, Miles Bridges. Interesting stuff that happened on social media with him. Not gonna go into it, but next, Bulls have. There was a report from Jake Fisher from Bleacher Report that the Bulls have interest in trading for Rudy Gobert, which they already have Nikola Vucevic. So this makes this pretty interesting. What do you think about the Bulls having interest in Rudy Gobert?
Oh, that's a little strange to me. I think all around player Nikola Vucevic is better. Just the all around game. But if I was going to go on what are they better at and what they're better at and the heights that it brings you, and yes, I understand why you would go with Rudy Gobert because he is an amazing defensive player
Mhm.
and he's changed what the Jazz defensively have looked like over the years. But at the same time, I just that kind of perplexes me.
Yeah.
I just don't know how that works.
Yeah, I actually always like Vucevic of like what he can do, spacing the floor. It makes it really easy for DeRozan to do his work in the mid range and like drive to the basket, do his thing. Like you had Rudy there. Now it kind of clogs things up a bit. Not sure how I exactly like it. Next, we talked about it a little bit. Actually, I'll just go over real quick. There's also a report DeAndre Ayton not super likely to return to the Suns next season. We touched on that. I just wanted to bring that up. But lastly, we have the report. So last week we talked about that Quinn Snyder unsettled, maybe gonna leave. Now we got the report. Boom, Quinn Snyder out of there. No longer is the Utah Jazz head coach. And then we got the report from Woj that Donovan Mitchell is unsettled and unnerved with the departure of Quinn Snyder. What do you think about this news, Jeff?
Yeah, like I said, I know a lot of people are saying that they think this is the move for Miami. I honestly don't think so. And if it's not Miami, I really don't understand where else he would go. There's not really one perfect situation where I think he either aggressively heightens their situation or negatively impacts their situation. Everyone loves a pipe dream of talking about the Knicks. I think that's one that people will say. There's always the Lakers with their pipe dreams. They'll probably say something, but realistically, it's either Miami or it doesn't happen.
It's 100% agree. And there's also other reports that like teams are calling the Utah Jazz about Donovan Mitchell and they're turning it down immediately. They are not going to trade him. They're going to trade Rudy. It's Donovan Mitchell's their guy. And I wouldn't be surprised if they hire Nick's assistant coach, Johnny Bryant, which is like his best friend. So we'll see how that ends up. But that's all I got for the weekly roundup. Jeff, do you have anything you wanna add before we call it a show?
No, I think we got everything out today.
Awesome. Well, yeah, man, this is another fun one. I think this happens every single time. It kind of surprised me more this time that we went for an hour and about to be 40 minutes, and we somehow, I mean, hey, we love talking about basketball. We can go on forever. Listeners, like always, if you enjoy us talking this long, let us know. If not, we can make it shorter. We can do our thing. But also, let us know what you guys think. Give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review. It helps us out a lot. But really appreciate everyone listening to our episode. Again, we got the links in the description. We got Jeff killing it on Twitter. And yeah, this was another fun one, and this was episode 32.
I have one last thing.
Yes.
If you like the short form, if you would like a short form version of this, of us doing this, let us know, and we'll start feeding that into our TikTok page.
Yeah.
Which you should also follow.
Yeah, for sure. Links in the description. Definitely. And yeah, episode 32.
Peace.